What does cancer and feeling worthy of love have to do with one another? I have been waiting to release this interview for over a year. I had the absolute honor and pleasure to interview Dr. John Demartini, who goes through the top 3 things that you need to know when it comes to living your most authentic self and how to thrive after a cancer diagnosis. I've gone back and watched this interview at least 3 times because it truly does give me all the feels. I will feel goosebumps, tears, empowered. I feel completely in line with who I'm supposed to be and more authentic at the end of the day. It's a real way to look at yourself and what you do on a daily basis and how you can absolutely thrive given anything that's come your way, especially a diagnosis such as cancer. So make sure you watch until the very end because he gives great advice on how you can master your own life.
Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, said, when you start on your journey of personal development, you blame things on the outside. And then you go to a next stage and you blame things on the inside. And then you go into a more advanced transcendental awareness where you have nothing to blame. You find that there was a hidden order in things after all, and that there's an unconscious motive and strategy that we're using to create symptoms in order to guide us to do something. And so I've been fascinated by that mind-body relationship.
I absolutely love that and where you came from and where you are now, inspiring that whole body approach and that innate intelligence and how your body really is searching for homeostasis. So what I would love to hear you speak about is in the world of cancer and chronic diseases, because I see a lot of cancer patients who feel like they just need to cut out the tumor and the surgeons just tell them once you cut it out and burn it out and chemical induce it out, do all of that, then you're cured and you're fine. And a lot of people don't really reach for that understanding of, okay, why did this happen in the first place until the cancer comes back generally. And they say, okay, what I did the first time didn't work. So now I have to figure out, okay, where else in my life are things off, or what else am I doing that's throwing it off? So I'd love to hear you talk about cancer, and even with that homeostasis of our bodies really just trying to find that balance, and how patients can really take this message and to kind of extend and learn more about their system and heal ultimately.
Okay, I'll be glad to address cancer. I like to define cancer as the last ditch effort of our physiology to try to teach us how to love. Because a lot of times it brings us closest to the people we have cared about, that we've allowed trivial perceptions to interfere with the expression of true reflective, self-reflective intimacy. But let me see if I can go down the rabbit hole a bit. Every cell has a response to its environment, the perceptions of the environment. You have passive sensory reception, and then you have perception, which is from information stored in what they used to call the subconscious mind, which is just neurological associations left in the brain from previous experiences. And they combine to create what you believe or your reality is, your mythology of the world, your narrative of the world. And if it is homeostatic and balanced, and you're objective and see things in a balanced way, your physiology is normal and it doesn't get perturbed. But if you perceive something that is highly supportive of what you value, you tend to activate the mind in a way that you're conscious of the upsides, unconscious of the downsides. And you become subjectively biased with a confirmation bias on the positives and a disconfirmation bias on the negatives, a false positive on the positives, a false negative on the negatives, and create an adrenaline response to seek it out, whatever this thing is. And it's in the amygdala registered as prey. So you're now going to want to consume it. Or if you see something that challenges you, what your values are, you may activate, again, a sympathetic response and a fight or flight response where you're conscious of the downsides, unconscious of the upsides, see it as predator, and have a different response. Again, this biased interpretation. Now, these biases can go all the way from 1-to-1 ratios of balance into polarized ratios, all the way to infinity over 1 and 1 over infinity, all or none. And when you go into an all or none perception, your adrenaline is heightened. And whenever you do, the amygdala is firing and the nucleus accumbens or the pallidum are at their peaks. And what happens is it is now perceived as a threat, because anything you infatuate, you fear its loss. Anything you resent, you fear its gain. This gets so accentuated when it goes to all or none that we have to stay away from that which is threatening with an instinct, and we have to seek that which is supportive with an impulse. And we're now an automaton reacting to these subconsciously stored associations and reactions. And we can have an event in our life that initially causes this polarity. And then we can have what is called promoters and compounders along the way, which are new associations that stack up and perpetuate that into further generalizations and extremes. And when it goes to an extreme, we activate at the cell level and in all of our physiology, a primitive part of our brain. Whenever we have a balanced orientation, we get blood glucose and oxygen into the forebrain, the medial prefrontal cortex, the executive center, and we end up having more objectivity and reason and intuition working for us to balance life intuitively to homeostasis. But whenever we are highly polarized, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into a more primitive part of the brain, the amygdala, and towards the hindbrain. And we go into fight or flight and rest and digest extremes. And we now avoid and seek as a survival mechanism with these subjective absolutes. When we do, our immune system, when we're under high distress perceptions instead of eustress perceptions, it activates earlier toolkits of the DNA. And we have, as you know, 8% of our genome is viral, another 8% or 10% is bacterial, and it goes up the, you might say, the phylogenetic evolutionary sequence. We still have all that DNA in us. And through transpositions and deletions and duplications, we can reactivate that DNA and activate oncogenes and primitive DNA around this. Paul Davies and Lineweaver and a few other people have done some great research on this, showing that when we're under high distress levels, where we are in black and white, all or none, fundamental viewpoints with absolute perceptions, we activate these oncogenes. And we can initiate these from psychological distress responses and perpetuate them. And then what we do is they're creating symptoms. Whenever you get a sympathetic extreme, you end up with epigenetics going through to methylate to neutralize the oxidation. And if you go to the other extreme, you go towards the parasympathetic and you do an acetylation to oxidize reduction. And it's a homeostatic mechanism to try to bring us back into a balanced perspective. But we want to run and dramatize our story at the therapist about how we've been, wronged or something, and run our story, and we've been a victim of history instead of a master of destiny. And we perpetuate these cascading epigenetic and eventually neurotransmitter and eventually second messenger and eventually kinase and phosphatase changes. And then we open or close the DNA accordingly. And we cause, in some cases, clastic or blastic responses. Too much mitosis if it's parasympathetic, or too much apoptosis the other way. And we get a runaway cascading of extremes, which we've labeled cancer, which is actually a feedback mechanism to try to make us become aware of what's going on in our environment in a more balanced way. But we're so palliative in care in our methodologies and modalities of care that we're thinking about getting rid of the symptoms instead of learn what the symptoms are implying. And I'm interested in applied physiology more so than palliative, palliative approaches, which is simply working with a chemistry or, as you say, a frying or cutting something out. I'm not saying that that doesn't have a place. In some cases it does, but that's not the first place I look. I look inside the human psyche and look at the environment. Now, obviously, if you're in a high radiation zone and you've got melanoma responses, you're exaggerating with pride your capacity to do what's unnatural in the environment. And if you're in a toxic environment, again, you're overlooking what your body is trying to whisper to you about what you're eating. So it still boils down to a psychological component. And I'm always amazed at how we sometimes throw that out with the baby with the bathwater, the idea of the psychology. I'd like to share a story if I could. You said
Yeah,
you would like me to do a story.
I would love that. Yeah, I also would love for you to tie in how much purpose plays a role in someone's healing as well, because I see that where cancers or even complex disease, whether it be chronic Lyme or mold, anything that's been dormant in the system, we're finding that higher reason to be well really motivates people. But I'd love to hear from you on how that really is a driver into finding that homeostasis and that balance once again.
Yes, every human being, regardless of gender, age, culture, they live with a set of priorities, set of values, and things that are most important to least important. And whatever's highest on their value, they spontaneously are inspired to fulfill. They don't require extrinsic motivation. They're just spontaneously called from within, as theologians would call it, to act upon it and fulfill it. And whatever's low on your values, you require extrinsic motivation, reminding and incentives to get you to do it. So you need reward if you do it, punishment if you don't do it, to get you to do it. And I always say motivation is a symptom, not a solution for humanity. So I'm not really a motivational speaker. I'm an educator that inspires people to live authentically according to what they value most. Because if you fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, you don't have to be dealing with distractions that don't. Distractions are the things that cause the impulses and instincts that lead to illness. So whenever you're living by your highest value is called by Aristotle the telos, the end in mind. It was called by Napoleon Hill the chief aim. It was called by Tennyson the primary objective and the magnificent obsession that you're called to do in life. It's called your métier. So whatever is highest on your value is what you feel is your calling, your purpose in life. And whenever you're living in alignment and congruent with what you value most, that blood glucose and oxygen goes into the forebrain and activates the medial prefrontal cortex, which sends fibers down into the amygdala that calms down with glutamate or GABA, calms down the distractions in our life and keeps us focused and inspired in our life, which is wellness promoting. When we're actually pursuing challenges that inspire us and the select things that we want to tackle, instead of responding to distresses of things, challenges we don't want, when we're pursuing those challenges and being objective towards those and mitigating the risks and strategically planning and taking actions on that, we actually increase our wellness factor, our objectivity, which is neutrality, and we don't feel the loss of things or feel the gain of things. We just are focused on the outcome of what we dream about, what we're inspired by. This is wellness promoting. This helps our immune system. It helps balances our physiology. It helps advance us away from that highly polarized cancer state and returns us back to normal. If you look at the actual molecules, the signal molecules that are in differentiation and de-differentiation, you can see that when you're living by your forebrain, you go through differentiation and go towards normality in cells. But when you actually go into high distress levels, you activate signal molecules that take you back to primitive systems to deal with those emotional reactions that once were extremophilic in the environment billions of years ago. So we literally have the capacity to move forward by living by priority. One of the greatest healers on the planet is to actually do a value determination and look at what the actual priorities you have in life and prioritizing your daily life and saying no and delegating all lower priority things and saying yes to the things that are highest in priority. That, without a doubt, will heal a lot of conditions. Irritable bowel condition, chronic fatigue condition, a lot of conditions that we blamed on external, extrinsic little germs or whatever that have been correlated and associated, but not causal, automatically renormalize, and physiologically our immune system manages very beautifully if we just stay to priority. A lot of symptoms in our life are nothing more than feedback mechanisms to get us back to authenticity. And our authentic ontological state of being is an expression of what we value most. Our highest value is our identity. If you have a mother who's dedicated to beautiful children and ask her, who are you as a mother, as an individual, she'll say, I'm a mother. If you're a healer, you'll say healer. Whatever's highest on your value that you dominate your thought on, that you create in your life and focus on, your identity evolves in it. And your authentic identity is a healing state. That's why everybody wants to be loved and appreciated for who they actually are, not the facades and personas and masks that we wear, but as we actually are. We want to be loved for both sides. The the two sides of our life the way we really are. And so when you live by purpose and live by meaning, and extract meaning, when you're infatuated with something, you're conscious of the upsides, your intuition is trying to point out the downsides to get you back into the mean. And when you're resentful to something and you're unconscious of the upsides, your intuition is trying to point out the upsides to get you back to the mean, so you can extract out meaning out of your existential state and get into the essence of your being and live ontologically by priority. And that is wellness promoting and eustress, and actually helps the immune system and physiology return to its most differentiated and fulfilled state. So absolutely, being purposeful is a crucial component in the wellness industry.
So what would kind of be your first step to tell, as practitioners, what would you tell patients who have been sick for so long and they feel like they've lost their purpose? They've lost what gives them that excitement. Maybe they were a busy mom or a busy entrepreneur. They were doing all the things that fulfilled them, but this illness has just taken over and they feel like they're just down and out and can't remember of what inspired them. Like, where do you even start with patients like that?
I don't go by the story. I start prioritizing their life and not use these. Illness is a strategy. It's an unconscious strategy for many people. I'm going to show that story on cancer. Just this will give you an example. So I had a lady that I worked with that was around 59, just going on 60. She found out she had uterine cancer. The uterine cancer, they went to a particular hospital system. They said, well, we don't know if we can do it. It's now gone through metastasize. So it wasn't a grade 1, it was grade 3, 4. And it started to metastasize. And as a result of it, she said, well, I don't know what your treatment, you want to do an experimental drug on it. Well, that's not inspiring for people to hear an experimental drug, really. Unless they really know they're going to die or something. That's not something they want to hear. So she went to another hospital, and the hospital there had a nicer looking doctor. Believe it or not, the nice looking doctor somehow made it more believable. It's quite interesting, and said, no, we can help it. So the bedside manner of that doctor and the confidence of that doctor versus the experimental nature moved her over there. People want to go to certainty, and whoever has the most certainty kind of rules the game with the healing arts. So then they start a chemotherapy cocktail. And what's interesting is right at that time, I had the opportunity to have a session with her to do what I do, which is basically help her from a psychology perspective. And it was amazing. She had not had sex for 23 years. Now that's an interesting thing, because her husband had an affair 23 years ago, and it disgusted her so much that she refused to have sex. Well, of course, that's going to increase the probability of him going out and having sex with somebody else again. So it's a self-perpetuating thing, which he had done. So she was disgusted and shut down her sexuality. So I don't need my sexual organs because I'm not having sex, kind of thing. She was working at a church and was in the mindset that the more she suffered, the more the afterlife rewards. That's what she was brainwashed into thinking by this minister she was working for. So, and that if, sex is not really important, so as a result of that, that's not what really matters in the afterlife. And so she was kind of being infiltrated by ideas that may or may not be grounded. And in the process of doing it, she also was very bitter and very angry and very absolute. When you asked her questions about her husband, there was a lot of absolute languages. He always does this. I never have to do that. I would never do that. He's always this way. He never does this. And whenever you see all or nones, you know you got cancer patients. I was president of the Cancer Prevention Control Association in Houston many years ago, and I saw that pattern over and over again. That's made me intrigued by cancer. So whenever I started working with her, what I decided to do is actually go through and do what I call the DeMartini method and go in there and sort through those wounds. We made a list of them all. One by one, we spent 6 hours clearing all the wounds. So when all of a sudden he was having the flings, how did that benefit you? Well, I got to dedicate my life to my work and to my spiritual path. And if he had not done that, what would have been some of the drawbacks? And she would have had him demand more sex because she had a lower libido than him, and she didn't like to do it. She felt she was obligated to it. And there was all kinds of things that we had to neutralize. We neutralize and neutralize and neutralize 6 hours of stuff. And when she got through, she had tears of gratitude, just grace. And she realized there was an appreciation all of a sudden for him in a way she never saw it. She realized that her life, things were on the way, not in the way. And that's more wellness factoring than in the way, not on the way, which is illness factoring. And she was grateful for life instead of ungrateful. And putting on a facade of proud and superiority and bitterness sitting inside, festering inside. Now, in the process of doing it, the areas that were going, it was actually metastasized over into the liver, which is typically associated with anger. It went into the intestines, which is assimilating things, can't understand why things happen, and there's a relationship there. And also into the bone, which is a deep foundation of her core belief systems. So anyway, we worked on that. And over the next 6 weeks, as she was going through this cocktail of chemotherapy, 99% of the cancer was cleared. Now, the doctor was claiming it's the cancer cocktail. I can't prove one way or the other, but I just know that we cleared stuff and worked throughout those 6 weeks and cleared stuff and made her grateful and have her had affection back. It's simultaneously with the combination of maybe the cocktail, there was some sort of resolution. And they were celebrating that they only had one more treatment left, and it looks like it's going to be a successful treatment, and she's going to be cancer free. That's what they were doing. The doctor was, inspired by it. The surrounding family was inspired by it. Everything was fine. And then her daughter happened to go to dinner at a restaurant and ran into her stepfather. This was her second husband, this woman's second husband. The stepfather, who is holding hands with another woman, which is the woman he had the affair with all those years earlier. Because he thought that the wife was going to die and he didn't have a job and she was the one providing for the family as the martyr. And he had to go and find an alternative pathway in case she was going to die. And so you can understand his motive. He didn't work because he had other health problems himself. So he had to do a backup plan. But the daughter runs into him and sees them holding hand and watches it. He's not aware of this. And all of a sudden, she's now in a predicament. Do I say anything to my mom? That's going to add stress. Do I not? Do I leave it alone? And she was caught. And she was internally conflicted in this. And so the next time they're all at the family, the mother saw that she was distraught by something and couldn't look her straight in the face. So what's going down? And finally, she looked over at him and he opened up, and she then had to spill the beans and the whole thing came out. Well, the wife at that time, who had resolved this stuff and was more, into healing everything else, all of a sudden went into a vicious spiral and couldn't even look at her husband. The idea that he's now going back to that woman and going back and, and she just went down and just felt this is futile. And she went back into a new form of resentment for that. And in the next 3 weeks, it metastasized. I mean, unbelievable metastases took over. And it started literally that week. And now the doctor said it was all because the cocktail, the cells mutated and it adapted. And this happens with chemotherapy and And we're going to have to do radiation therapy. So they started to do radiation therapy. And they automatically, when they did, they had to go to the various loci in the liver and the small intestines, and they overdid the radiation in the intestines, and they singed the intestines. Fibrosis took over. In a very short period of time, it completely occluded the intestines. They had to take out the intestines. She thought, I'm going to be wearing a bag. I don't want to be with my husband anymore. I'll never meet another man, everything else. I don't want to live. And I saw it in her face. She said, I'm done. And she died just 2 weeks later. Now, the doctor didn't believe that the psychology had anything to do with it. He just said, it's just, that's what happens with the cocktails. And I can't prove or disprove. It's anecdotal. I have no way of proving that. But after seeing hundreds, and I mean hundreds of patients that clear some psychological stuff, start living by priority, start feeding their body something with real food, get adjustments so the nervous system is able to create impulses that are homeostatic and allow the inborn intelligence to do its job, and to not sit there and keep perturbing the body with misperceptions. I believe that we can work as a holistic approach and put that together and help that person. I've worked with oncologists on this, and they're using some of this methodology on dissolving distresses to help on that. And I believe that that you'd be wise to use all of those together. Yeah. And I can't prove or disprove, but I can tell you right now, the daughter, in her mind, she knows exactly why she died. It wasn't the treatment. It wasn't that's what that helped her and healed, and then it didn't heal her. It was the idea that I have now futility in my life. I don't want to go. I'm done. Yeah. And that's a factor. And I have a guy the other day that I worked with that's got a brain tumor, and I started working with him on this brain tumor, and he's been going through unbelievable experimental therapy for this. It has been torture. I mean, he has 5 days out of the week with vomiting, nausea, pain, suicidal states, just the treatment. And it's a necessary treatment according to the thing. And it has not shrunk the tumor at all. It's still growing. And they've just tried everything. They tried to even go to Brzezinski's down in Houston, Texas. They were going to look at neoplasms, plastic. And so all this was being approached, but I had a consult with him, and I found out something. I asked him some questions, and we traced this thing back a ways. And I found out that he was in the service, and he saw some people die, and he felt guilt and responsibility for his platoon to die. And he's never been able to deal with it. And I asked him, would you like to go and clear that the guilt and shame about leaving these people dying? Because the truth is they would have died anyway, but still sometimes in your head of a platoon, you think you're responsible for that. And he's beating himself up. And he said this, he says, no, I don't want to go there. I put it in the back of my mind. And he put his hand right on where the tumor is with his hand. I put it in the back of my mind, and I've just leave it there, and I'm not going there. I'm not going to go on that. Because he had a brother that they did some sort of a psychological thing on, and he ended up committing suicide when he discovered something he had done that he felt really ashamed about. He says, I'm not going that route. I wasn't going to do that. I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just helping you find the order to things. But he said, I'm not doing that. But he put his hand right exactly on the tumor where his hand was. And I, these things, you see these things that are just mind-blowingly correlations of regressions. And I just think that I think it's insane not to utilize all of these tools, the chiropractic approach, the naturopathic approach, everything that could assist people to maximize their potential, the psychological approach, nutritional approach, all of those approaches, they can be maximized to give people an advantage. I'm amazed. Sometimes I go in the hospital and they'll give you antibiotics, and they won't do anything to replace the microbiome. And then they wonder why we now know microbiomes are underlying a lot of these conditions. And no, it's not even discussed. It's starting to be now, but for years it hasn't been discussed. So I think that there's a lot of these chronic illnesses are chronic perceptual inducements and chronic behavioral patterns that are leading to these things, and nobody's addressing those. Really, they're doing palliative care. They can't make money on educating people on how to live as much, they think, as treating a condition and being dependent on them. I mean, I'm amazed. I saw somebody the other day that had COVID, and they went to the hospital, and they say, when you really get sick, come back. Go home, you might not get that sick. It was really quite interesting, the approach. When you're in a point where you can't breathe and we have to put you in ICU, and we can then claim to have a higher return on our investment and come back, kind of thing. And I think that's I think that's insane. But our immune system is resilient and amazingly adaptable if we live by priority. We eat not to live, to eat to live, not live to eat. And we feed our body quality foods, and we have the spine working. People they underestimate the significance of the spine. You know, you can floss your teeth, you can't floss your spine, but the spine with piezoelectricity and alteration of nerve impulses is affecting physiology. And I've certainly seen it. I've watched spinal adjustments take people out of comas. I've watched them have people who couldn't walk. I've seen amazing things with the spine, and I've also seen amazing things with quality nutrition and quality supplementation. That's mind blowing. So I think that it's wise to consider all of them and not be too narrow-minded, to be inclusive, not exclusive, and not be just stuck on that one little specialty and think everybody has to fit that box. You go to a surgeon, you're going to get something removed. You go to a nutritionist, you're going to get nutrition. If you go to an integrative specialist, you're going to probably get a more whole approach to existence.
Absolutely. Wow. What a great example of even just how her mindset and the patient with ovarian cancer, and just saying how that resentment and that anger and all of that was just brewing for that long. Wow, what a powerful story. And I see that all the time where certain patients have the same type of cancer or the same drug routine, but some respond so much better than others. So how do you explain that, other than what they're holding on to and what other emotional triggers or what's causing toxicity in their mind, really? Oh, that's so empowering to know, and for people to really dig deep and to figure out what are those blockages. And it can be scary to go through that and to dig deep and say, okay, this is why I feel guilty, or this is where this is coming from. But that work is so important. So tell me more about your breakthrough. I know that you train thousands of people around the world with the breakthrough process. Is this like a weekend seminar that you spend with doctors or with patients even? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the Breakthrough Experience is a 2-day program, which I've presented 1,132 times. I have another one this weekend, so that'll be 33. We've done it in 66 countries. Now online, we've done it in every country. But it's something I've done for 32, going on 33 years, that program. And that's more of a self-mastery program, learning how to take command of your life. See, any area of your life you don't empower, other people will overpower you. If you don't empower yourself intellectually, you'll be told what to think. If you don't empower yourself in business, you'll be told what to do. If you don't empower yourself financially, you'll be told what you're worth. If you don't empower yourself in your relationship, you'll be doing honeydew things around the house instead of delegating them. If you don't empower socially, you'll be told the propaganda and the misinformation and the uncertainties that we get told. If we don't empower ourselves in healthcare, we'll be told what drugs are taken, organs to remove. If we don't empower ourselves spiritually, we'll be probably subordinate to some dogma that's possibly a bit antiquated. And so it's a program designed to help people take command of their life, master their life. And it's, I've been working on human behavior for 49 years and lecturing all these years. Since I was 18, I've been speaking. And I'm a firm believer that the information in that program is a culmination of all those years. I research every single day of my life to try to give the most significant information I can to empower those areas, because you're here to do something extraordinary and live a really inspired and purposeful life. And there's absolutely no reason you can't. I set out to create original ideas that served the world. And I've created original things that serve the world. I've set out to create a global business. I have a global business. I set out to have financial independence. I'm more than financially independent. I set out to have social influence and meet amazing people that are doing things around the world. I have met thousands of them now. I want to have a global family. I've got a global family. I live around the world. I live on a ship called the world. And I also wanted to do something pretty amazing. I'm 67 in a couple of months, and I'm still cranking at 18 to 20-hour days. And I also want to do something that's inspiring to people, because I've realized, I think we got plenty of religions, but we don't have inspiration in life. And people are looking outside themselves instead of inside. So I'm a firm believer that you can master your life and design it, live by design, not duty. And I believe that that's more wellness promoting than illness promoting. And most people are subordinating to other people and living in the shadows of others instead of on the shoulders of giants. And that is automatically going to create an internal conflict between injected values of outer authorities, mothers, fathers, preachers, teachers, conventions, traditions, and mores, with moral hypocrisies that trap you in an unfulfilled conflict between what you innately want to create in your life and what you're supposed to create. And I'd like to liberate people back in designing their life the way they really love to do it, not fantasies, but real objectives with real strategies that have real action steps that are grounded, that allow you to go and achieve amazing things. And I've seen people do it, and that's what the breakthrough experience is about, to help people do that. And there are thousands. I've taught over 100,000 people just live one-on-one with them, but there are thousands of people. And then I've taught about 7,000 facilitators. I have 7,000 teachers out there teaching this work now, and all of them are doing this. So we have millions of people we impact annually with the method and the tools. So
That's
yeah, I'm
so
a firm
exciting.
believer in mastering life.
So exciting and so inspiring. And I feel like now more than ever, it's time for people to take charge of their life. Because in so many areas, I know here in Canada, there's a lot of things, certain medications that are forced upon us, or else you can't do this, or setting a lot of what we hear in the media and the news, and a lot of messages just being poured onto us. But to own your own accountability and to have your own authenticity in this time especially is more critical now than ever, I feel like.
Well, I believe that studying symptomatology, if you look, the autonomic nervous system, as you know, is underlying most symptomatology. You know, whenever you got a symptom, if you look at what cell is doing what, either too much or too little of, you can see that it's, you know, if you have the blood vessels that are dilating or contracting, or the platelets are growing in number or declining, or the fibroblasts are increasing fibrous tissue. Like I had a scleroderma the other day, case of scleroderma, and you know, the fibroblasts are producing excess amount of collagens, which are sympathetic induced, and the stress response that she was under was definitely inducing this. And it started exactly when this particular stress occurred. It started showing the development. I mean, you can't miss it if you ask the right questions. The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. And if you ask questions about applied physiology and understand the autonomics and understand the transmitters and understand the neurohormones and regulators and understand the epigenetic impact and the enzymatic pathways and cascades, if you understand that physiology and see how the cell's doing its job, you can trace some of the things back into perceptual inducements. And so I'm a firm believer in not just giving a quick fix with a cookbook, but to actually go in and probe and give people their power back. I'm a firm believer that we've been robbing people their power instead of giving them the power back. And not everybody wants it. And so thank God for the other modalities. But I'm not interested in just band-aiding people. I'm interested in helping people give their power back so they can take command of the physiology. I've seen literally hundreds and thousands of cases of people that have brought their wellness back by living wisely, authentically, and living not for immediate gratification, but for long-term vision. You know, it's just like the lady that got the Nobel Prize in the telomeres. When you're living by your highest values, you have the most resilience and most adaptability, most objectivity. You also have telomerase enzyme goes up, which add the telomeres. And so you elongate the telomeres so you have a longer lifespan in a sense, because you have a longer vision. People who live by their highest values, they achieve things. They tend to set bigger space and time horizons on bigger goals, and they tend to create goals that eventually go philanthropically beyond their life, and that leads to an inspired life. Today I had lunch with a gentleman who's a billionaire here that lives on the ship with me, and amazing guy. He's patenting 4,000 patents. He's opened up educational institutions. He's an amazing guy. And he's 79 years old, and he's on fire, and he's got a purpose to live way beyond a normal lifespan, and he's active. And when I see people who are living like that, I see people that contribute vastly to the world. They exemplify what's possible, as Einstein said, which is the greatest teacher. They're vital. They have vast amounts of energy and vitality. They're inspired, enthused. They're grateful for their life. They love what they do. This is how to live. And most people are living with immediate gratification and having Monday morning blues, Wednesday hump days, thank God it's Friday's week friggin' ends, and living with a bipolar state of working to get a living to then spend it on an escape to then go work and get a living. And they're living by duty, and they're fitting as, you know, as Ernest Becker said in his Denial of Death, they're living in survival instead of thrival. and they're basically trying to fit in and by the collective, hero instead of the individual hero. It's the transcendental individual heroes that are ridiculed and violently opposed that leave their mark in history. And usually the people that are literally unborrowed visionaries that are willing to go out and do something extraordinary are the people that have the most vitality. They're the alpha human that leads the way. And that is something that is trainable. There's the science behind it. And that is where wellness resilience is maximized and physiology is normalized. And that's what I'm interested in doing, helping people master their life. And that, to me, I got into chiropractic because I really believe that that was the natural approach, and that I believed in innate intelligence, and I believe that there's a magnificent universe, and I think it has laws of the universe and intelligence in the universe, whether you want to call it that or not. And I believe that to the degree that we align with that, as the Stoics said, and even Pythagoras said, is align with those laws and we live with those laws, we have homeostasis, and we get rewarded by the universe to let us know we're on track and in tune and on target with mastering our life. Authenticity is what every symptom is trying to get us. Our physiology, psychology, sociology, even our theology is trying to get us to be authentic and live by what's most important and do something that's sustainable, fair exchange, serving other human beings with equity and equanimity. When we do that, we master our lives. We're not likely to have half the symptoms that people live with. I'm amazed how many people just, their life's about their symptoms instead of their service.
Yeah, it puts it in a different perspective. I am just so in awe of listening to you speak. I could listen to you for hours and hours, and I'm really excited about the offerings that you provide because you've lived it, you've done it, you've gone through the journey, and even now just living on a ship. I think that is so amazing and so inspiring. You're really living your true authentic self. And so to be teaching others and facilitators this exact same process on how everyone can do this and how we can all step into that space is very motivating and inspiring. So I want to thank you so much for your time today. If there's any final thoughts that you have or anything that you want to kind of wrap up with, I would love to hear that. If not, then, you just blown me away speaking today.
Well, whoever's listening, whatever field you are, I can encourage you to make a list of everything you do in a day, everything, down to the nitpicky little action steps you do, not vague, broad generalities, marketing, this, that, but the actual daily action steps you do. Make a list. Next to the list in the column to the right of it, write down what does it produce per hour? What does it produce per hour? Because that's measurement of the service you're providing to human beings. And then a column next to that, and then prioritize that. And then next to that, do another one, and that is how much meaning does it have? How much is it on a 1 to 10 scale is meaningful to you? Because when you can't wait to get up and be of service to people, people can't wait to get that service. And then next to that, write down how much, if you delegated it to somebody to do the same standard of action and quality, how much would it cost to do that? And make a list of all the cost of delegating that. And then look at the spreads between what it produces and what it costs, and then prioritize that. Then next to that, write a column of how much time is actually spent on that. And on the final column, write down the final prioritization of all of that. And that way it gives you an idea what to be focusing on that serves the greatest and also inspires you the most. And then layer that into layers based on, highest to lowest priority, and then delegate the rest away. You're not going to live an inspired and fulfilled and healthy life if you're not delegating low priority things. If you're trapped doing something that devalues you, that's uninspiring to you, you haven't given job opportunities to other people, you haven't gone out to do the thing that you're really here to serve and make a contribution on, and you haven't mastered the art of wealth, because wealth is a reminder of how sustainable your fair exchange is with other people and solving problems in the world. In the process of doing that, you will automatically rise into your power and leadership. You'll exemplify what's possible. You'll inspire other people. They're going to want to be around you. When you're on fire, people want to watch you come burn. And people, places, things, ideas, and events will come into your life to help you fulfill this mission of yours. And you want to give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and be of service, and not live in the shadows of anyone, but shine and be an exemplifier and unborrowed visionary of what's possible. And know that no matter what you've done or not done, you're worthy of love, because all of those are nothing but feedback mechanisms to guide you to that mastery. And if you do that, you will bring healing to people just by your very essence and the very being that you resonate. And I think that's part of the healing process. The master automatically is a healer. So give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, and do something extraordinary on planet Earth. If you try to be second at somebody else, you won't be first at being you. So no, don't envy and imitate anybody else. That's not the answer. Be yourself. The magnificence of who you are is far greater than all those fantasies you may impose on yourself. And that's it. Just if they'll think about that, that'll kind of fire in their brain, and they'll probably have some sizzle in their brain after that.
Each time I listen to this interview, I seem to draw out different parts of what he's saying and apply it to my own life. And it's such an empowering interview that I hope that you really enjoyed it as well. The first thing is just to remind you to stop living by other people's values. And secondly, give yourself permission to be you. Thirdly, your body is always trying to give you messages. So illness is not always a bad thing. It's your body trying to tell you something. And if you are encouraged to start digging deeper and learning about yourself and start unraveling all the things and the messages your body's trying to tell you, I encourage you to apply to work with me at drlori.ca. In the words of Dr. John Demartini, you have the capacity to be in command of your own life. And I look forward to us going through this journey together.